Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. The Steam Summer Sale is in full swing, and despite the feeling from a lot of people that Steam sales have gotten worse over the last couple of years, and in some ways they have, there are still plenty of awesome deals to be found, so I went digging. I decided to pick out 20 games, each of which are under $5, so not exactly a difficult decision to pick up any of these. They're all absolutely fantastic in their own way. They are many and varied, some of which you've probably heard of, that are great bargains, and some of which you may very well not have. So, bearing in mind that regional prices may vary, and the price I'm going to read out is in dollars, here are the top 20 picks of the Steam Summer Sale 2017. Transistor. Now, this is the cheapest price that Transistor has ever been on Steam, and it's a hell of a game. If anybody had concerns about picking it up at its full price because of the relatively short length of the game, clocking in at around 4 hours, this should hopefully dispel those concerns. The game does have a great deal of replayability despite being quite story-driven. Its New Game Plus mode involves leveling up your abilities and also, of course, making the enemies a lot harder. So in terms of its actual gameplay, it's certainly worth the replay. But the first playthrough of Transistor is nothing short of phenomenal. The second effort by Supergiant, following up their smash hit Bastion, was very different to what quite a lot of people expected. An interesting style of tactics RPG from an isometric perspective with absolutely beautiful art and incredible music as per usual. Awesome story. I enjoyed the hell out of this, and I found the systems of it far more interesting than Bastion, which was a relatively straightforward, narratively driven isometric shooter and combat game. This has some really interesting stuff under the hood when it comes to its combat and how the different plugins work with your character, creating awesome combinations, exploiting weaknesses, and really diving into that combat system does give it that longevity. I think a lot of people probably glossed over that because they were treating it as a narratively driven experience, but it is worth the replay. So not only was it great story, really enjoyable, but it also has that depth under the hood if you're willing to go and look. For that price, it's just a no-brainer. Absolutely worth it. Shadow of Mordor Game of the Year Edition. For $4, the amount of content that you're getting here is bonkers. This is an Arkham-style open-world action game in the Lord of the Rings universe. We say that, it's a bit more of a fanfic than anything else. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in there that purists would probably be quite upset over. I love the Lord of the Rings, but I did not object to what was going on in this game. The real star of the show is the Nemesis system, which allows for these really unique encounters. Enemies have names and can hold grudges against you. If you fail to kill them, they can come back stronger than ever, and they remember what you did to them. So you can end up hunting down a particular foe that has been a thorn in your side and creating these unique scenarios. Everybody that's played the game has told a different story about some orc war chief that was a giant pain in the arse. I would play it on harder difficulty because there comes a point where you might as well be invincible on the regular difficulty if you've mastered the Arkham style of combat. That is a commonly leveled criticism at the game, but it didn't really affect my enjoyment of it. The ending was also a disappointment for some people, but the Game of the Year edition remedies that because it does have all of the DLC and the new boss fight at the end. So prior to the new game in the series coming out later this year, this would be a great time to grab that at that price. That is a lot of fun for not a lot of money. Dust: An Elysian Tale. The incredible effort of one person who developed this game over the course of a number of years, did everything from the programming to the art to the music. Dust: An Elysian Tale is a really awesome side-scrolling action game. A little bit of spectacle fighter thrown in there for good measure. Everything about it is excellent. I don't judge games by how many people make them. 1 or 100 doesn't make a difference. I want to play a good game. The fact that a single person managed to create not only a good game, but a great game on their own is an achievement. It's a very enjoyable experience, unless you have some issues with anthropomorphic animal characters. Oh, for the days of innocence. Internet got a bit weird over the last 20 years, but it is a great game nonetheless, and I would highly recommend it. Pretty much all of the Valve games at incredibly low prices. I don't really need to tell you that everything Valve has made is really, really good. The price tags on the individual ones this time around in the sale are so low that if for some reason you haven't picked any of these up, now might be a really good time to do it. Portal 2 for $2 is a standout here, and weirdly enough, the 2-pack is $35. What? I don't understand that, but it's worth picking and choosing. The complete pack is usually something that I would recommend, but based on the price of these individual games and the fairly old tat that's in the complete pack these days, like Counter-Strike, Condition Zero, and the old Day of Defeat, things that people don't really play anymore, it's worth picking and choosing. So any of them are great value right now individually. I shouldn't have to tell you that when it comes to Valve games, but Portal 2 in particular stood out to me as a really great value proposition. Dishonored. For $2.50, the base version of Dishonored is a great game. I will say that the DLC, specifically Brigmore, Witches, and Knife of Dunwall, is arguably maybe even a little bit better, but the discounts on them are not brilliant. So if you haven't played the base version of Dishonored, it is an excellent buy nonetheless. A first-person stealth action game. You can approach it violently, you can approach it as a sneaky assassin, or indeed as a complete ghost if you so desire. An awesome, unique, steampunk-esque Victorian world, a great storyline, and some really fun mechanics with powers such as Blink and the ability to summon plagues of rats. There's a lot going on here, and the expand alone for Dishonored 2 is well on its way. But it's worth bearing in mind that Dishonored 2 launched in a very poor state on PC and is still having problems on some rigs despite some updates. So the original Dishonored, which runs brilliantly on pretty much everything, is a safe buy while you're waiting for them to fix that one up. Mount and Blade Warband. It's pretty rare that this game gets this cheap. I think because the developers realized that it's still very much in demand. This game came out years and years ago, but it has an incredibly active modding scene, and the longevity of it is ridiculous. The value for money here, bearing in mind the number of hours that you can get out of Mount and Blade, is quite clear. This is a medieval simulator of sorts. The best way that I like to describe this to people is to say, you know medieval Total War? Well, what if you were a soldier in that battle? Because that's exactly what you can do. You start off as a character of any sort from all sorts of different backgrounds, and you attempt to make your fortune, starting off with almost nothing, building up your own army of mercenaries, and eventually engaging in faction wars and taking over kingdoms. There's all sorts of great things that you can do in this, and the battle system in particular is quite a lot of fun. The longevity, though, as I said, comes from the really committed modding scene that this game has. There are so many different mods available. Hell, there's even a Star Wars mod of all things available for this thing, and several excellent Game of Thrones mods, so that should give you something to check out. If you were not necessarily interested in the setting that Warband provides, well, there are plenty of mods that have a lot of work and time put into them that can provide you with a different one. Stalker Call of Pripyat. Just under $5 for one of the best open-world shooters ever, as far as I'm concerned. It keeps getting overlooked as a result of Far Cry, but goddamn. Call of Pripyat is a first-person shooter and in the genre of what some people would describe as immersive simulator. It has all sorts of interesting survival elements going on prior to the survival genre really exploding, and also a very active modding scene, in particular with mods such as Misery, which make the game even harder, and it's already difficult enough in and of itself. It's a really intriguing world. It's dark and gloomy, gritty and a little creepy in places, certainly, and there is that nice RPG aspect to it that reminds me somewhat of Deus Ex and System Shock 2. The original game was great, but it did have some issues with the gunplay. I'll say called Pripyat's gunplay has been significantly improved. And again, great modding scene for this. So you're not just buying the game, you're buying a lot of potential extra free content on top of that. Dawn of War Dark Crusade. Of all of the Dawn of War games that are currently on sale, I think this provides the best value proposition just because of how much content there is in the box. When it comes to the single player, you have access to a Galactic Conquest-like campaign, the Dark Crusade, that you can play 6 different races in. So if you're not interested in playing a very linear, narratively driven campaign like the original game and, of course, the new game have, this offers you a bit more freedom. It's RTS goodness, a lot of it, with really big battles and awesome cinematic moments. Even though it's looking a little bit elderly now, it is still a really good real-time strategy. And once again, as you're probably seeing a common theme with these games, great modding scene for Dawn of War as well, including things like the Ultimate Apocalypse mod, which implement things like full-on size Titans. There's a lot of crazy stuff in this, and this is right before the expansions took a nosedive with Soulstorm and its terrible campaign. Dark Crusade still has an awful lot to offer within the Warhammer 40k universe. Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. There is never going to be a time where I don't recommend this when it goes on sale. Still my favorite gaming experience of all time. This is a single-player co-op game. As in, you control 2 brothers, one with each analog stick, or with the keyboard, which is a little janky. I'd recommend a controller with this. It's a short 2 to 3 hour experience, doesn't really have a lot of replay value, and it's not particularly difficult. But what it does offer is perhaps the best example yet in gaming history of the melding of narrative and gameplay. This concept of the Ludo narrative. There is no game, in my honest opinion, that does that better. I think this game maybe suffers a little bit from me overhyping it, so some people were disappointed that they didn't have the same emotional experience with it that I did. And all I could say is, I hope you do, because that experience stuck with me, and I'm never going to forget it. I'd say $1.50 for the chance of that happening is a bargain. Stronghold Crusader HD. God, I love the original Stronghold, and Crusader, in fact, which in my opinion was just a flat-out upgrade on top of the original game. Things went a little bit to hell after that for the developers. Stronghold 2 made a transition to 3D. It wasn't anywhere near as good, and then things got really bad with things like Stronghold Legends. Stronghold 3 was abysmal, and they started to finally come back around with Stronghold Crusader 2, which had its problems, but was a bit better. This is just a higher resolution version of the original Crusader game, which has a bunch of campaign content, skirmish content, and supports a huge number of units. It's a really good RTS involving castles. I don't think there is a better one involving sieges, real sieges, and the way that clouds of arrows just fall and plink off the parapets of the stone walls, the way that siege works, demolishing areas of the stone, the fact that you build a wall and no, you can't just hit it with a sword to break it like so many other RTS. It feels like a real castle building game with these simulation and management aspects to it as well. It's also got a really cool sense of humor. I really enjoy it, and Crusader adds a ton of new units which are all very interesting and fun to use, such as stealthy assassins and firebomb throwers. It's really, really good. Fallout New Vegas. It's the good one! Yeah, the one by Obsidian, which was somewhat buggy when it came out, but when it comes to storytelling, this is the best modern Fallout by a country mile. When it comes to narrative, when it comes to quest design and writing, it blows everything else out of the water. Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 don't even come close. It is absolutely excellent. If that is what you're looking for in a Fallout game, which was exactly what I was looking for in a Fallout game, then this is the one for you. And again, fantastic modding scene for this thing. And when it comes to DLC, it's a bit pricey, and it was very much a mixed bag. What I will say with Bethesda when it came to Fallout 3 is they did some cracking DLC for it, which in the case of this one, it was a bit of a mixed bag. But the base game is fantastic, and the mods available for it make it a game that you could be playing for hundreds of hours without running out of things to do. Super House of Dead Ninjas. Here's something that's cheap and nowhere near cheerful. Adult Swim has something of a reputation for publishing really hard games. Kind of started with Robot Unicorn Attack, and then Super House of Dead Ninjas followed that one up. And it is bloody hard, but it's very enjoyable. It's a relatively simple side-scrolling roguelite action game where you try to blitz through these extremely dangerous levels as quickly as you can. There's a pretty strict timer on it, but there is a huge amount of satisfaction from blitzing your way through the levels successfully. You will feel like a living god when you are able to master this thing. It is not easy at all. It was described by indiegames.com as Super Meat Boy meets Ninja Gaiden. That's a great description for it. For $1.39, yeah, not really much of an argument against this. Insurgency. Oh, God. This is an incredible shooter. And the price tag at $1.50, excellent. You might be a little bit worried that as a indie multiplayer shooter, it might not still have a player base. It absolutely does. It has endured as a result of it being an approachable but very authentic feeling shooter. It really straddles the line between a milsim and a more arcade-focused shooter. It feels authentic. It's not hard to get into. Like, there's not much of a learning curve when it comes to just playing it, but the sound assets of the game are so very, very good, and the feel of the guns is absolutely spot on. It is a great modern combat game. So if you're looking for something that is a little bit slower, a little bit more cerebral than Call of Duty, but not crazy complicated like Arma, Insurgency is great, and it still has a very active community to this day. There's still, currently as I speak, over 4,000 people online, so not even a question about you finding a game here. Shadowrun Dragonfall. The original Shadowrun Returns is something I really liked, but it was limited, no doubt. It was a game that was limited by its Kickstarter budget and its ambition, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. Then along comes the standalone campaign Dragonfall and basically fixes all of those problems. It creates a much more open world with a bigger emphasis on exploration and backtracking and being able to take as much time as you want, and that classic CRPG feel, excellent writing, and a really interesting tactical combat system is there. The Shadowrun setting is amazing in and of itself, and I really think Harebrained Schemes with Dragonfall nailed it and really did justice to it. So you can skip the original. You don't have to worry about playing that. This is completely standalone. Dragonfall is just flat out better in pretty much every way. So for $2.50, if you're looking for a cyberpunk RPG, this is your best choice. Machinarium. Why recommend Machinarium after all these years? Well, Machinarium actually just got an update. So the original game, as you might be aware, was made in Flash, which, needless to say, not a particularly good choice these days. This is effectively a free remaster at this point. They did it in a completely new engine, so you can pick custom resolutions, resize your screen, all that kind of thing, get it up to super high resolution, which is incredible considering how amazing the hand-drawn artwork in this game is. You can also now use gamepad, so you can play in big picture mode, and there are things like Steam Cloud saves and Steam achievements, and 14 localized language versions. Not that that really matters, because there's basically no speech in the game at all, but it is an adorable point and click with some interesting puzzles where you play as a lost little robot. And as I said, the art is mind-blowing. Absolutely worth getting it, and I've got to give great props to Aminata Design for putting in the time and the money to port the game over to a completely new modern engine. That's awesome. Absolutely fantastic. So do go support them and pick this up if you don't have it already. Sentinels of the Multiverse. Here's something that might have flown under your radar. This is a single-player strategy card battle game. It does have multiplayer functionality, but it's a cooperative game. So the point of it is that you have a team of 4 superheroes in this fictional universe, and you take on these really tough supervillain boss battles. You use the unique decks of each hero to accomplish this, and you combo the different abilities together and plan for the various phases of these boss battles. The whole thing is presented in this really cool graphic novel style. As I said, it's an original universe, so these are all unique heroes that the developers came up with. And this was a very popular physical card game before it was translated to PC. The advantage, of course, of translating these sort of things to a computer is that you end up avoiding a lot of the setup and teardown, which takes quite a lot of time with games like this. And you also don't have to track the rules yourself, so it's much, much easier to play. I will say that the additional content for this game is quite pricey at the moment in some instances. The base game does have a good amount of content for the price, but when it comes to the season pass and sort of DLC, I would probably hold off on that. So just a little bit of a warning. But the base game alone is worth what they're asking for it. King's Bounty Platinum Edition. King's Bounty, also known as Where Did the Last 40 Hours of My Life Go? So you might be aware that Heroes of Might and Magic was based initially on a game called King's Bounty, and it expanded the strategy aspect of it, but the idea of running around with a hero and collecting little doodads on the map and exploring it is something that came from King's Bounty, and this is a full-on remake of that, and it has expanded that concept a great deal. The Platinum Pack comes with the expansions Armored Princess and Crossworld. I would say Armored Princess is probably just flat out better than the base game, so it might be worth starting with that. But there is a ton of content in this. It's a lot of fun. The battles are hex-based, turn-based tactics, and there is some kingdom-building aspects to it, hero leveling up, and a bunch of RPG aspects to the game as well. Plus, you get a baby dragon. And you get to tame it and grow it, and it gains powers and murders people, which is incredible. What could you possibly ask for beyond that? It's a hell of a lot of fun. Heroes of Might and Magic 5, Tribes of the East. This is a standalone game, not just an expansion for Heroes of Might and Magic 5. You might be thinking, well, that is a little bit out of date, isn't it? What about Heroes of Might and Magic 6 and 7? Well, I enjoyed all of the Heroes of Might and Magic games, but I have to say that I think 5 is still the best at this point, and 7 was a big letdown in many ways. 5 Tribes of the East has a ton of content. Every single unit has 2 different upgrade variants available for it. There's a ton of campaigns, a great deal of factions, and some awesome skill trees for the heroes that are very well fleshed out. I enjoyed this a lot. On modern systems, still runs fine, looks a little bit dated. Thankfully, the turn timers are not quite as bad on faster modern PCs as they were with the launch version. Outland. Now, unfortunately, if you don't own this game now, you may have missed the free giveaway for this game last week. Oops. That said, for 99 cents, it's still very much worth it. So I recall this being one of the absolute best Xbox Live games. It was gorgeous. It was an excellent example of the sort of premium indie stuff that was coming out around that time, very much the golden age of premium indie, probably as a direct result of the rise of Steam and the rise of Xbox Live. Outland is one of those games that holds up to this day thanks to its awesome aesthetic, unless you really hate orange and blue contrast, or you suffer from color deficiency, which could also be a problem, because this game, very much in the style of Ikaruga, involves swapping colors to deflect different kinds of attacks and so on and so forth. It's an excellent action platformer, and it was developed by Housemarque, who just came out with Nex Machina. So this is really one of their first games, but it is an absolutely excellent title. I would highly recommend it. And last but by no means least, who could possibly leave Serious Sam in the corner? Out of the various Serious Sam games, I'm going to choose Serious Sam D XXL for a mere 99 cents. This is a game about stacking guns on top of other guns. It is one of the only games that lets you do this. It is one of the only games that basically lets you do it without limitation. If you want to stack 10 different rocket launchers on top of each other, Serious Sam D XXL allows you to do that. The original game was awesome. The XXL version has yet more content and more guns. Boss fights include a large mechanized gorilla with a buzzsaw arm, of course. Various velociraptors and what appears to be a well-armed caterpillar also make an appearance. It's a game where you can just turn your brain off and annihilate everything with a ridiculous stack of weapons, and sometimes that's just all you need to wind down after a hard day. There you go, folks. That is my top 20 in no particular order picks of Steam sale bargains. Everything under $5 or your regional equivalent. Hopefully there'll be something in there that you like, and despite the Steam sales perhaps not being quite as incredible as they used to be, there are still some excellent bargains to be had. Hopefully you'll find something in there to your taste. Just a quick plug, if you don't mind, before I sign off. Our partner, chrono.gg/TB, which sells one indie game per day at a massive discount, is still selling one indie game per day at a massive discount. And occasionally they actually beat the prices of the Steam sale. Yesterday they did the full complete pack of all of the Commandos games for far cheaper than the Steam sale had. So it's worth checking that out at chrono.gg/TB every day. And just by going to the website and clicking on the coin icon, you can earn what are called Chrono Coins, which is a free currency that you can trade in for free games. As of the time of recording, they are currently selling the rather excellent Tesla Grad and the soundtrack for $1.50, which is a nice little bargain. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, by all means do feel free to click the like button. If not, the dislike button is right over there. And I'll see you next time.